Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Toni Ringgold. And again, I hope everyone is having a wonderful weekend. I know I am. The sun is out. The birds are chirping. I saw a few flowers blooming. I think spring is finally on its way. Not that we really had a real winter. We had a few little cold snaps, but you know how Texas is. I'm really, really excited. I hope that we have a spring and it doesn't jump to summer. But again, I think we usually have 2 seasons around here. At any rate, I am sitting here with a wonderful guest, as you know. Every week I try to bring you some people that are doing some positive things in the community that are not just talking about it, but they are being about it. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in. This show is something that is really, really needed. And, you know, usually I talk to you guys a little bit, but I really want to jump into this because it is a very important subject, and it involves our future. So without further ado, I'm going to allow my guest to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kelly Hardy. I am the Executive Director for CASA of Bell and Coryell counties. That doesn't mean a house in Spanish. It actually stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. They are a community of volunteers that we actually train. They take 30 hours of training on. And they take 30 hours of me on, along with everything else, to literally go into court, be sworn in by a court officer, and be appointed a case that involves a foster child or foster children. It could be an entire set of children. They could take on more than one case if they choose to do so, and we actually have some fantastic volunteers who do just that. So we are really excited to be here to let people understand who CASA is, exactly what my volunteers do as they journey through the foster care system with a child, taking on agencies and adults and educational issues, along with their medical, dental, and any mental health issues that come along with that child. We look for reunification with parents when they do come into the system due to abuse and neglect. That's our first priority, is to see if we can fix that underlying problem with regards to a child. And while we're maintaining this child, we ensure that there is services that go on with regards to the children, and we also make sure visitation is taking place between the parents as they journey themselves through reunification and trying to fix that underlying problem that resulted in the child being taken out of the home.
Wow, that's a lot in and of itself. I hope you all caught all of that. That is amazing. And what it is what I really love is that it is volunteers. These are people that see a need in the community. What type of people come in and volunteer to be able to become an advocate?
We have all different people, all different walks of life, and that's exactly what we want, because we have children from all different walks of life who need to see adults in a position of caring, love, and strength. Right. And it's the strength that we like to see, and we also talk to our advocates about looking at strength-based help for these children as well as their parents. So I have psychologists, I have school teachers, I have insurance salespeople, wow. I have all different individuals. I have beautiful Fort Hood military men. In fact, yes. One of my gentlemen speaks Spanish, which has been very helpful. We have Spanish-speaking children who need to hear their own language. Absolutely. And relatives in which we can communicate and not lose the idea of trust with one another because of a communication issue. Absolutely. We just recently had a young lady come in and she does sign language. Oh, I have had the court ask me several times, do you have anybody who knows sign language? Imagine being a child who is taken out of their home, put into a foster home, and cannot speak to the individual or hear what's going on about themselves. It's very difficult.
So, I can only imagine. And so to all of our listeners out there, if you are someone who speaks sign language, come in. And I'm sure there's a criteria. I'm sure they have to do some background checks. They have to do some of those types of things to be vetted in order to be able to become an advocate. But do you have to have a college degree?
No.
Okay. There you go.
You do not have to have a college degree. You have to have some insight and some understanding into the background of children, and understand how to love on a child and be committed to a child. Our biggest criteria at this point in time is to make sure that when somebody comes in, they're committed to the training. Mm-hmm. They're committed to the idea that there'll be a year we're asking you to give to a child, because it takes about a year for a child to go through foster care. Mm-hmm. And so we want to know that if you come in and you're going to commit yourself to us, there is a year obligation to that child once you are on. Exactly, because we are what are considered the one constant in a child's life in the foster care system.
Right.
We try to be. I mean, I know you guys are volunteers, and I get that life issues do happen. What we actually have are some fabulous supervisors. They go alongside every one of our volunteers, and they help you out. They are your foundation, your area to gather knowledge and experience immediately. If you feel like you're in trouble on any issue, that's what our supervisors are there for. So I have 4 excellent supervisors who do assist my volunteers and help you through this particular process.
Absolutely.
You don't have to have all the knowledge at your fingertips right now, because I have people who do that for you.
Yes.
But as you indicated, it's really important to understand we do have to background check. We do not want to have anybody near our children that will re-abuse or cause problems for our children. We must see that you have the capability, the calm, kind heart that a child at this stage who has been traumatized needs. And we're not just talking about the trauma of the abuse or the neglect, but being taken out of your home.
Your comfort zone.
That's
everything that you know. And here's the thing about abuse, and a lot of people don't understand, is that if it's the only thing you've ever seen, you become accustomed to it. So even if you come into an environment that's better for you, that's great for you, it's still very scary, and it is traumatizing, because this is all new ground for you. This is uncharted territory. So you don't know who to trust. You don't know what's real. When you see people actually loving on each other and actually being good to each other, you might think that that's something out of a television movie. You don't know that that's actually, real life. And so having that consistent person that you can look at and be like, okay, I know Miss Toni. I know Miss Kelly. I know that Miss Kelly is going to take care of me. And when I see Miss Kelly, that she is going to be invested in my best interest at all times, that no matter what happens, she wants the absolute best for me. That right there is enough to give a child hope. And so I really am so appreciative about what you do and taking on this labor of love. This is a nonprofit organization, so nobody's getting paid the big bucks, folks. And when you do this, this is volunteer work. And do understand that it is a volunteer, that this is something that you're giving up. But when I tell you something, when you give the amount of love and fulfillment that you get in return, it's better than anything that money could ever buy. And I really want to reiterate that to our listeners. If you are just tuned in, you are tuned in to Sundays at the Square. I am your host, Toni Ringgold, and I am sitting with the executive director for Bell and Coryell counties. She is with CASA. And give me the CASA. What does the acronym stand for one more time?
It stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, because that's exactly what you end up doing, is you go in and swear in with a court officer, and you promise to be what's called a guardian ad litem for children in foster care. And you will take these children on as if they are your own, to make sure that they are receiving all of the necessary medical care, education, mental health, if that's involved. It's so important to understand the following, and that is that our children are followed. When she talks about being consistent, they are followed by a single volunteer. Those children can be moved from a home 2, 3, 4 times at any given point in a year or longer. I do know that children who age out of the system have seen at least 9 placements. Please understand, one of my biggest issues is to make sure that their education does not fall behind. These children out of foster care have a higher risk for being homeless, for not having
because they don't have the foundation.
That's right, or a monetary background or support. And so we sit here and we say to ourselves, gee, 9 different placements, what does that mean to your education? Guess what? That means 4 months every time a child is moved. 4 months they can lose for their educational purposes. So they've been left behind. Right. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
We have a No Left Behind Act that should say this should never happen. That's what a CASA volunteer does. They make sure that when the child's placed in a foster home, when the department is handling them, the Department of Children and Family Services is handling them, that they get that necessary attention and that these issues do not get lost in the mix.
Absolutely. So real briefly, just walk me through a day in the life of a CASA volunteer.
A day in the life of a CASA volunteer is kind of exciting, I have to say. When it first happens, we bring them into our office and we interview the person who says, hey, I think I'd like to be involved in what a CASA is. And a CASA is something that started in 1976. There was a judge out of Seattle, Washington, who basically said to himself, you know what? I'd like to have somebody in the court that's not driven by the law, that's not driven by regulations, that's not driven by an attorney who has a special interest in just that parent or just the department. I need somebody who's a layman out there who's going to go out, see this child, have eyes on this child for me, and come back with information to tell me what's going on with this child in the foster home. Do they like it? Are they getting their education? Is everything that they need happening for them while they're going through this trauma period, while the family's going through this breakup, as it is? And ensuring that this child is in a constant relationship with one individual that they can trust. And that's who the CASA is. So what is the life like? When you get that first case, and I have a lot of them come out of being sworn, and I call them up and say, this is your first case, and they're like, oh my gosh. Yes, everybody's going to be nervous of the unknown, the unknown. But it's not an unknown when you meet that beautiful little child, that child who comes and grabs onto your leg and says, hi, who are you? Can I keep you as, can I keep you? In fact, I have several people who, she's my ice cream lady. He's my fishing guy. I had a gentleman who took kids fishing for the first time, 10-year-old boys out fishing for the first time. He brought the poles and they just loved him. So it's one of those areas where that first meeting, you're getting to know that child. You're going out probably 15 to 20 hours in that first month. And that sounds like a lot. Does that not sound like a lot? That sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot, but it's probably
But think about how much time you spend in front of a television set. And do you remember what you saw 2 days before? But you certainly remember that cute little face or that lovely little girl.
Or the impact you're making.
That's right. And that child who needed help with that, their education or some math work. Now, we have fabulous foster parents, and I don't want to downplay that they are raising these children, but this is that special friend, that special person that's just connected to that child, and that does become a big issue. In fact, 91% of the people who do this particular volunteer opportunity say that the biggest thing they get out of this is the relationship that they have with the child. The second most important thing is the impact that they make in court for that child. So if you think that that you're just there to be a big brother, that's not what you are. You're also their champion in court to make sure that the court hears exactly what the child wants, the voice of the child, but at the same point in time, you're also the voice of reason. You're the best interest of the child. So where attorneys have to say what their client just wants, you get to come in and tell the court, look, Bobby loves his parents, but at this point in time, his parents aren't ready to have Bobby home. And the court, you need to understand how much he loves his parents, how much he wants to go home. That's the hardest part for a CASA volunteer, is to go in and have to say, though I cannot recommend that.
Right.
So we do see them visit the foster home. You are required to visit at minimum once a month when the child is under 100 miles. But when the child's over 100 miles, at minimum, it's once every 3 months. But let me tell you something. Those minimums are not what my people do.
Right.
Because
you're going to want to go a little more than that, because you're going to really want to know what's going on.
I have a gentleman who has had cases, and he takes those over 100-mile cases for me. And this guy will drive twice a month, 3 times. I cannot believe how often he goes out to visit these children who are a great distance away. Yeah. And we have to understand the following, and I want you to know this. 59% of our children are outside of their county of origin. That means 59% of them are taken from the very county they live in, and they're put into an entirely different county.
So when you become a CASA volunteer, you are going from where the child came from. So even if they may live in Travis County or somewhere else, Harris County, if they were taken from Bell County, the CASA volunteers would be based here or Coryell.
Because when a case comes into court, it's based in that court jurisdiction. So if I have a Bell, the parents are residents of Bell County, that's where this case will be will be held. My volunteers, however, living in this county, often go to other counties: Williamson County, Hayes County. I have them all over the place. In fact, I have them down in San Antonio at times.
Wow.
Gonzales, I have a couple of kids in those areas. So it's just one of those things where it is a traveling job, and as that child moves, and that child could move 2 to 3 times. So you could find yourself up here in Bell, down in Travis County, then back up here in Bell, depending on the needs of the child and depending on the availability of foster homes.
It's definitely a labor of love, but one that will not go in vain. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back with Sundays at the Square.